Watty Glen are Ulster champions once again, back-to-back champions in Ulster. They have beaten Scotstown 13 points to 11. A 2-point win for Watty Glen is enough to set themselves up with Kilmacud Crokes in the All-Ireland Championship semi-finals, but more importantly, win the Ulster Championship. And look, I missed the majority of the first half. Obviously, the game between Dingle and Castlehaven went to penalties. A little bit frustrating, maybe, that they didn't leave more of a gap between both games, because I'm sure multiple other fans were probably in the same situation. I'm not too sure if they put Glen Scotstown's first half maybe up on their YouTube or TG Caher Extra. I'm not entirely sure how they did it, but yeah, missed the majority of the first half, unfortunately. So this will be more so a review of the second half and a review of what I saw and a review of the results. But look, for Glen, fair play. They dig deep. You know, they were 2 points down at half time. So obviously Scotstown, you know, from looking at Score Bio, came out of the traps quite early on in the first half. Were managing the game better, you would imagine, and we're the better side. But you know, one thing about this Glen team is that they've been there and they've done it before. They obviously, as we very well know, beat Kilcoo in the final last season, a massive result, a massive win for their club. And they dug deep again in this game. Ewan Mulholland, the wingback, outstanding performance, 3 points. We all know now how important that position is in Gaelic football. It's becoming one of the most important positions on the pitch because it's that added element to your attack. It's the player who can break the blanket, who can who can run between defensive lines, who can be your +1 in attack, and also contribute quite massively in terms of defense as well. And he was outstanding. Wins man of the match, 3 points. He set up a couple of scores as well. He was absolutely brilliant. Danny Talon stood up big time towards the end of the game as well with some big points, as did Connor Glass, who also impressed. Got a big point in the 55th minute to put Watty Glen in front when they were 10 points apiece at that moment in time. And look, for Scotstown, they look like they just ran out of energy in the closing minutes. Lost the ball on a couple of occasions, a few loose passes, running into traffic. I think you do have to commend Glen. You know, Scotstown did have a goal chance just before the Darren Hughes chance right at the end of the game, or the Kieran Hughes chance right at the end of the game. And I think Michael Warnock was the man who got the block in, you know, and that was a huge moment. That goes in the back of the net. It was a 2-point game at that moment in time. Scotstown maybe would have won it. You know, maybe Glen wouldn't have had enough time to go down the other end and get the equaliser. So that was absolutely huge. But look, you have to commend Glen. They dig deep. They got over the line. It's one thing I think you have to give credit to Glen for this year. They maybe haven't played the most pretty football. They maybe haven't looked as good as last year at times. But what they have been able to do is get over the line, dig deep in big moments, score late winning points. And they've done exactly that. Jody McDermott, Kieran McFell, both getting on the score sheet in injury time as well to cement the win. And it would have been very easy for Glen when they had a 2-point lead, when they had a 1-point lead, to keep the ball for large parts, to recycle possession that bit too much and put pressure on themselves. Like looking at Dingle earlier against Castlehaven, who had a 2-point lead in injury time, in extra time, and also led in injury time of normal time. And Dingle obviously was much tougher conditions, you know, from looking at this game or from looking at the game earlier. But I think the difference was Watty Glen, they put their feet on the accelerator and they wanted to cement the win. Capitalize on the momentum while they had the ball, you know, hit Scotstown on the counter-attack, punish them for losing the ball. Whereas earlier today, Dingle didn't do that and allowed Castlehaven to find their way and bite their way back into it. I do think you also have to commend Castlehaven for finding a way to come back into it when their legs were dead. But yeah, look, a very intriguing game, end to end. Maybe it could have went either way. As I said, I'll have to go back and watch the first half to really see what Scotstown were doing right as opposed to what Glen weren't in the first half. 2-point lead was obviously key. And looking at Scotstown in terms of scores, Shane Carey with 3 points, Kieran Hughes with 2 points, Jack McCarron on the score sheet as well. Rory Beggan obviously gets himself a point from play towards the end of the second half as well. I think that was to level the game. I think at 9 points apiece. And And yeah, it was just, Glenn's, I suppose I know the term they use their experience to get over the line is probably a bit of a jargon term in some ways in Gaelic football, probably gets overused a little bit. But I think Glen, I think, the confidence of having been there and done it before, especially going down the home stretch, they could have got nervous. He could have played wrong passes. They could have messed things up a little bit, but they didn't. They kept their nerve, and a few vital blocks going down the home stretch, from the likes of Ryan Dugan, Michael Warner, Kieran McFell, with a couple of big blocks, Ewan Mulholland as well. And obviously that late chance from Kieran Hughes, which was an extraordinary effort. It was a good bit out. Looked about 10, 15, maybe 20 yards out. Goes for goal, power driver of an effort, but fantastic save by Bradley, tips it over the bar. And thankfully enough, from a Watty Games Glen point of view, there wasn't any more time left on the clock for Scotstown to get another goal chance. And that was pretty much that. From looking at the second half, I thought Glen done a great job, and McCarthy didn't seem to have the same influence as he's had when he's played with Monaghan and with Scotstown for the majority of this season, where you see him, bulleting up the pitch from wing back in a similar fashion to what we've seen Ewan Mulholland do today. We didn't quite see that as much. And I think fair play to Glen for having a game plan for him, stopping his influence on the game. And I think that was key in many ways in Glen getting over the line. But yeah, they do enough. And it sets up a almighty semi-final clash between Kilmacud Crokes and Glen. We know what happened when those two played each other last year. Replay gate, replay saga, and everything that went with it. Well, now's your replay. Here's your chance to put things right. Crokes have looked a little bit vulnerable at times this year, although I think we've also seen them at their absolute best, and at times they've even looked even better than last year. Watty Games Glen at the same time, though, have looked, probably not entirely great at times this year, but what Glen have been able to do is dig deep and find a way to win, even when they particularly haven't been playing at their best. But their second half performance was outstanding. 5 points kicked in the first half, 8 points kicked in the second half. Their big players stood up when they most needed them, and ultimately that is what got Glen over the line. For Scotstown, look, it's been a tremendous year, getting to an Ulster final, taking out Crossmaglen, taking out Kilcue, taking out powerhouse teams of Ulster. They've obviously had the addition of Jack McCarron this year. They'll be there next year, I'm sure. They'll be thereabouts next year. Dominant force in Monaghan. I know they didn't win it in 2022. Obviously, Ballybay won it. But Scotstown, largely over the last 10 years or so, have been the dominant force in Monaghan. And, look, they'll be back, no doubt about it. Ulster, probably the most difficult province to win. And look, they played very well in the first half. As we said, 7 points kicked, just ran out of legs a little bit. And Glen just got some vital blocks. And, when it's going down that home stretch, it can really go either way. And in the end, it was Glen who managed to get over the line. Let me know in the comments down below, who is your man of the match? Let me know your predictions now for the semi-finals. We know our semi-finals, Glen versus Kilmacud Crokes and St. Bridget's versus Castlehaven. There'll be a review show tomorrow evening. Myself and Matthew Hurley will be looking at both of these two games in more detail, breaking them down in more detail, discussing them in more detail. And hit the like button, subscribe. If you're new to the channel, share it out to your friends and family. That would be much appreciated. If you think anyone needs a bit more GA content in their lives, share that out with them. So, hit the like button, subscribe. Speak to you all again.